I'm Tanya Johnson, registered psychologist, registered play therapist, co-founder of the Institute of Child Psychology, and mama to two wonderful little girls. Today, we're going to be chatting about boys and sensitivity. So, what's interesting is that we know that our infant boys are actually more reactive to stresses at birth than our little girls. When we look across a lifespan, researchers show that there's actually no biological differences between boys and girls when it comes to sensitivity. Yet, when we look at self-reported scales, females are way more likely to present themselves as being sensitive, emotional, empathetic. I think we all know the reasons why. Across the world, we live in societies and cultures which tell boys and men that they have to act in a very specific way. Paul Keefe calls this the man box. You need to fit into that box. Be strong. Don't cry. Don't show your feelings. And if you don't fit into that box, things often become quite difficult. We know for our highly sensitive boys that they're at a much higher risk for anxiety, depression, being bullied, and low self-esteem. But there are some very specific things that we can do to nurture our highly sensitive children. Before we jump into some of those strategies, let's just quickly look at the characteristics of a highly sensitive kiddo. I often like to think of our highly sensitive children as children who intensely experience their internal worlds and their external worlds. So internally, they often have big feelings, complex feelings, which can lead to things like meltdowns, but it can also lead to seeing the world in a very different way, to being highly creative, and also, interestingly, to not only understand their own feelings, but because of these rich emotional worlds, to really start to understand the feelings of others. These children are often highly empathetic and can pick up on little cues, emotional cues from others. Mom's voice seems stressed. Dad's voice seems stressed. What's going on here? Is this a comfortable environment? These kids tend to be really attuned. So that's that rich internal world. Their external world. These are our kiddos that when they fall down, we hear about it, often loud cries. They experience the lines on their socks, the tags on their shirts, the textures of food. They become easily overwhelmed by clutter in classrooms, by the noise in classrooms, by fluorescent lights. These are children that thrive on having downtime, close friendships, deep conversations. They often have a vocabulary that's far beyond what we might expect for their age. They see their world in a very different light to their peers. These children, when in the right environment with the right relationships, tend to flourish. So they're what we call our orchid children. Just under 30% of the population is an orchid. Our orchids are children who do beautifully when the soil is just right, when the sunlight is just right, when the water level is just right. These children flourish. Those are our orchids. The biggest group of children are our tulip children. These children fall in the middle. They're not sensitive. They're not highly sensitive. Under conditions of stress, they may become more sensitive. And then on the other side of the spectrum is our dandelion kids. So for our dandelion children, these are kids who you can plant them anywhere. It doesn't matter what's happening with the water, the sunlight. These kiddos are going to flourish. So today we're going to be talking about our orchid children, our orchid boys. For our orchid boys, there are some very simple things that we can do as parents. The first is to help them to celebrate their sensitivity. So we need to look at that sensitivity, find the gifts. Every child is going to be unique, but we need to find the gifts in their sensitivity. So do they write well? Do they read well? Are they able to really understand people deeply? How do they do in those one-on-one projects? Is that where they thrive? We want to find where their specific sensitivity helps them to light up and then really nurture that gift. And as parents, we need to be talking to them all of the time about how their sensitivity helps them to bring something new to the world, that their sensitivity is a strength and not a weakness. We want to provide positive role models for them. Talk to them about people, about men who are creative, empathetic, our dreamers, our inventors, our creators in the world. This is what we need to be talking to our boys about. And on top of that, we need to challenge gender stereotypes. So every time we hear those messages about Be strong. Don't cry. Bury your feelings. We need to challenge that. The other thing that we want to look at is really nurturing great friendships for our kiddos. So not always, but our highly sensitive children tend to do better in smaller groups. Very often we'll see that they shy away from team sports. And so we want to find, again, what feeds their soul. It's the same with our friendship groups. Often big friendship groups where the conversations might be more kind of shallow, they don't do as well with. Find smaller groups for our kids and see if we can nurture those opportunities for them to be in those spaces regularly. The next thing that we want to be really aware of with our boys is that the research shows that positive interactions with our highly sensitive children really helps them to grow beautifully, whereas negative interactions really impact them more so than our non-highly sensitive kiddos. So the moment we're doing any form of discipline, we want to stay away from harsh parenting practices. Yelling, screaming, shaming, taking things away, putting them in timeouts. And instead, we want to give them lots of space to process what's happened. Some of our kids may need us to stay with them during those moments. Other kids might need a little bit more space. I find often our highly sensitive children don't want us to name what actually happened. So they don't want us to name their feelings because it's too much. So that usual psychology bit of your feelings are frustrated right now often doesn't work with our highly sensitive kids. So give them space and then ready, sit down with them and go through what happened, what needs to happen next, and how they are going to make it right. Remember, our highly sensitive children are driven by connection. So we always want to come back to relationship. What was the impact of what just happened on your relationship with this person? And then again, how do we make it right? The next thing that we want to focus on with our highly sensitive boys is because they have such a rich, intense, emotional world, it is very important that we empower them with a vast emotional vocabulary. So beyond I'm angry, mad, sad, we want to give them names for different shades of feelings. I'm frustrated, I'm annoyed, I'm impatient, I'm embarrassed. The research is clear, and you can have a look at Dr. Daniel Siegel's studies on Name It to Tame It. When children can name what's happening for them accurately, the stress response in the body goes down. Very, very important for our highly sensitive boys. Pointed out in movies, in books. Again, best place to teach in emotional vocabulary and make sure that you are role modeling a vast emotional vocabulary. The final thing that I'm going to touch on for our boys and also for our parents is boundaries. So for our boys, they need to, when they're highly sensitive, when they're taking in a lot from their world, they need to know when enough is enough. They need to be able to say, okay, I don't want to do another play date, or I don't want to do another sport. And when I need that downtime, this is how I look after myself, away from a screen. So I read, I write, I go for a jog, I play basketball. What are the things that helps to restore their battery? And as we talk about those boundaries, our parents need boundaries too. If you're highly sensitive yourself, it's likely that you either over-identify with your kiddo or you're completely overwhelmed. The only way they learn boundaries is by watching you put in great self-care. And then if you're not highly sensitive, having a highly sensitive child can almost feel as if you're learning a new language sometimes. So again, we want to slow down, be patient, put in boundaries, and we always want to search for the why underneath our children's behavior. Our highly sensitive children, again, I come back to this, under the right conditions, with the right relationships, they absolutely flourish. If you want to find out more, we have a wonderful course on highly sensitive children. I'll link it in the description below.